Yep, it's your favorite N-word, Terrence Prescott Barnes. This time, I'm going to be telling you about the definition of a super being. As a kid, I was fascinated by the Magic Moving Picture Square and the animations I used to watch. I was already hipped to enjoying and expressing my imagination by the time I was in the first grade. 1991 was the time frame. Hated every second. I wasn't faking it in imagination land. I started off having ridiculous dreams, or what I thought about the most was what I dreamed about the most. Realizing I had that kind of control allowed me to always be prepared to say no to anything that wasn't just as entertaining. Spider-Man, Mickey Mouse, Voltron, Thundercat, Superman, etc., etc. Even before then, I heard, if you don't like something, do it yourself. So I started with this juice drink for kids called Squeezes. Out of the 3 other people involved with the competition, I made about 10 new Squeezes. Easily. So I started fanficking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Sonic the Hedgehog, X-Men, Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat stuff. Because those imagination lands had at least a handful of things I talked about and liked about regularly. Most specifically, the imagination lands and not the characters. So I took out the likes of Sonic, Wolverine, Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Liu Kang, and Bison, and Shang Tsung. Had a gay old time doing it, and the real world was just boring distractions after boring distractions. I dead ass can't remember what inspired me to write my first story, other than seeing a dark-skinned black girl who had on a red vest, blue jeans, a white shirt, and some jewelry. Probably thinking she needs security because dolled-up girls are always hunted. So I made up a big, huge group of characters called Security. Big, huge. Mad, big, huge. I should have stopped at 24, but ended with 60. I digress, but I really was grading a lot. Anyways, red vest, blue jeans, and white tops over a plethora of ideas for overpowered characters that would secure the safety of innocence. Now, eventually, I started making my own list of power. Superpowers, primary, secondary, tertiary, and non-elementals. Martial arts and weaponry, while filling in blanks whenever. Blanks came up like the power gene, hair colors, acquiring more superpowers for a single vessel, DNA, RNA, the anatomy of how they became super. Then there it was. Science class teaching me, even in theoretical universes, I need to be able to document how everything became. So the ether system was developed, then everything fell in place. From the first story to the last one, chronologically, the ether system is the factual thing and the reason why the supernatural exists so powerfully in the Tri-Stone era. Listen and absorb. This what makes a super being a super being. Super being. A vessel blessed by the universe to be a catalyst of power that can manipulate its gift in whatever way it achieves it. Ether system. The organ that allows super beings to absorb energy from any location, in any dimension, plane of existence, or universe. Beyond molecularly small, when it absorbs energy, the stronger a super being, the more energy they can hold within and around the vessel at any given time, unless anti-super being fluid is around. Anti-super being fluid. The literal process of extracting an ether system out of a vessel. In most cases, a dead vessel would decompose and a fluid will seep through absolutely anything to return to the source of gravity wherever they are. Even in outer space, the ether system will be heading in a direction of the core of a planet or a sun. Only outside of a vessel is when the ether system can be used to diminish the effects or nullify the effects of super beings. The fluid itself, if it touches a vessel's skin or any superpower touches it, it will keep a vessel from activating their power or disappear, even in ultimate blasts of superpowers. Magical wells. All planets, and even all suns, have magical wells. Magical wells hold all ether systems of dead super beings. The wells themselves is just where the liquid lives. Once it makes it to a giant body of magic, it will stop. Most magical wells are protected, and if you guessed right why they are, you are smart. Drinking anti-super being fluid will turn anyone into a super being or just recharge super beings to their ultimate core. This way, Arrow Ordinance Lords come into play. A division that's stationed at them, or a division that makes sure people don't bring superpowers to the innocents. Only super beings are allowed to swim in those wells because it's impossible to not submerge in liquid without it entering a body. As well as in a lot of cases, non-super beings becoming one isn't always a given. Unless a regular being is living an ultimately healthy lifestyle, their vessel will not survive the transformation that a natural super being went through during conception. Spirit grid. A mental place that a super being knows instinctively. It's the way they decide to allocate their experience with using their ether system. It lengthens out in a 360 degrees manner from their mind, provoking someone to move in any direction with upping their ether system. Everyone sees the spirit grid the same, but differently at the same time, if you know what I mean. Vessel. A body of a sentient being. The power gene. A chromosome simply made out of pure ether. Both an embryo and sperm can carry it. Not all cells have them, but more than likely a female will pass on a power gene more often than a male in different capacities. Level 1 and 2 super being females are the only ones that get close to the ratio any super being male can give. Because there are so many sperm cells, the chromosome is randomly spread out throughout a male's life. The stronger a female gets, the more her embryos will permanently have the chromosome placed in them, making omega levels have the chromosome on 95% of their remaining eggs. The earlier they become that powerful, the more likely their offspring will be overpowered. Don't get me wrong, a child born of super beings without either parent offering the power gene is still a super being with the ability to become the highest form of super beings possible. Super being genetics. In reverse order, non-elementals have more dominant traits. Those will be animalistic zoanthrope powers, unlike werewolves. Werewolves are deemed as curses. Having a werewolf as a superpower in the Tri-Stone era is not. Zoanthrope genes cannot be spread through the swapping of bodily fluids, but 10 times out of 10, a butterfly wielder will conceive a butterfly wielder. Whatever power the parents have will have more dominance when a baby is in conception. Tertiary powers hold the second most dominant genes, then secondary and finally primary. Any superpower is super regardless, but the most dominant superpower gene is pollution. Washing it out of conception cycles requires outside forces like spellbinders to alter a baby's superpower genetics. Now that we're done with the definitions, you remember what it was like to be full of energy all the time? In a 5-year-old body, where you can just get up and go. Now think about having the genetics of a fire welder. If you can muster up enough mental capacity to trigger your ether system before puberty, you can light a finger on fire safely. Mind over matter is how the strong wordy becomes strong. Might begins with a simple thought. Focusing on it will activate how an ether system generates the energy around it. At the tender age of 5, there is nothing bigger than a small indication of power, if you can muster it. It takes a hard-bodied youngin to do dangerous things at 5 years old, though, and it never goes down like that. Unless the genetics are 7 lines deep, a 5-year-old won't be able to do anything mighty. They can still do damage because all it takes is one flame or the activation of energy in an enchanted place. Then all hell breaks loose. So while a child is growing, the development of the genes keeps it from being devastating. Now when puberty hits, there's a whole other ball game, because you never know how detrimental a specific vessel will grow into their powers. There are instances where electrical storms can cause catastrophic damage. An entire home could be flash fired, flash flooded, flash frozen, or flash launched. In most of my stories, technology and civilization uses architecture that guards against it by having anti-super being fluid built into architectural materials. Now let's talk about something tricky. Coventry. When spellbinders do what they do it through word of mouth and will. Spell might depends on a wielder's due diligence of casting a spell over and over again. Same training method idea. In order to get strong, repeating is the answer. Yet they have to gather ingredients for those spells over and over again, so their training methods are curved alike. They are still considered super beings, but their offspring will show powers derivative to one of their parents' four categories. They will be able to use small instances of those powers until they go through their coven spellbinder activation ceremony. Then they will begin choosing their four categories. More than likely, their initial element will be forever changed. This unlike summon wielders, who can acquire 6 main categories of their choosing. The first one is a spirit that attached to the baby vessel and cannot be changed out. No matter what summoners want, the first superpower is permanent. Now moving along. From 13 on up, super beings have direct access to their spirit grid, where they can take their powers in all directions. In some of my stories, there's this thing called the Super Being Surveillance Program, where the aerologists of the worlds help with the manifestation, training, development, evolvement, cherishing, and creation of powers. Puberty is also when the categories of super beings are listed as either levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and or Omega. Level 1s have the ability of making everyone know within a mile radius that they have powers. They can also defend and offend with their powers, but cannot use them for a long period of time. Meaning, about the mile radius thing, when a super being activates a superpower, the anatomy of the world catches on, and that's where like blinking lights will come in, so to speak. So everybody has that effect when they summon superpowers because they're taking energy from reality. Now, level 2s can generate more constant energy and forming it into the element they were bestowed with. Level 3s began to leave traces of superpowers being used, meaning they can go hours with hard use of elemental energies. Level 4s are marked by being able to transform or give properties to oneself, others, or objects as a state of imbuing or actuality. In other words, enchanting. Level 5s can damage at least or more than a 10-mile radius of terrain with their powers, have access to energy pool, can use another vessel's energy pool, can provide energy pooling to others, basically meaning they can become a reactor of magical might, hours upon hours of being active. Level Omegas can create apocalypses, usually achieved by summoners, spellbinders, and zoanthropes that can create a virus of their animal or creature. If you're smart, anyone holding a monster type of superpower usually achieves Omega status too. In the grand scheme of things, story number 11 Remix is the lowest in power of the totem pole. None of the characters are higher than level 1, let alone showing superpowers in a hardcore fashion other than colored orbs when they connect their attacks. Majority of my stories have characters that end up at level 4, 5, or Omega. The strongest in Magical Might story is story number 1, The Order, and that will be the story that has security in it. This story is the closest one to Dragon Ball Z's universe, but much more worse and futile, and yes, I did say much more. When you find out about it, your jaw is going to take a nap on the floor. Lastly, the watch list. In the Tristone era, there's always an ancient group of ghosts that can interact with the real world. While interacting with it, they are either forming scrolls, magic books, magic tablets, hosting a website, or talking to the living about the information. These ghosts' role revolves around documenting all categories of the super being spectrum, 1 through 5 in Omega, with all of them having their own subcategories to list out all super beings in the world at that time. All non-elemental powers are magistry, hexenry, sorcery, hell, heaven, imagination, summon, zoanthropy, energy, gruntage, which is the code name for viruses and bacteria, afterlife, culinary, morph, charm, code name for metal, mutism, code name for machinery, ammunition, gunpowder, armada, X, psychic, and pollution. All tertiary powers are craft, encompasses all things in light, fantasy, encompasses all things in darkness. Explosion, magnetism, rainbow, and shadow. All secondary powers are crystallization, dark, light, electricity, matter, mist, sound, and zenith. All primary powers are time, astronomy, fire, water, earth, wind, rival, which is the code name for space, weather, ice, and vegetation. Now that I'm done with all that, what kind of powers would you like to develop? And do you think you would ever make a watch list? TPB out.